this term. Wynne is just starting the recording so that everybody is informed about that. And obviously that recording is available to anybody if anybody wants to revisit anything to see. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. You've already heard Councillor Ian and Councillor Liz have said that they need to leave at 3. Do we have any other apologies or comments as regards attendance today?
Apology from David Meredith, Chair.
Councillor David has sent his apologies. Okay, anything else? Anybody on item 2 got declarations of interest? I think it's pretty straightforward today, and same comments in relation to item 3 on your agenda, declarations of party whip. I'm assuming nobody's got anything to declare there. Good. Item 4 on your agenda. Just before we go on to that, members, we're taking item 4 on the agenda. Welcome to Georgia Bevan. We also going to, once the meeting's closed, we're going to have an informal discussion, which Georgia will lead on that. Just a few updates on certain things. And so there we are. So Georgia, I'm going to hand over to you to give us a presentation on the secondary school strategy.
Diolch yn fawr. I have a presentation which I'm hoping to go through if that's okay. I just want to check you're hearing me because I've got my headset on.
Yep, it's all loud and clear to me.
Okay, lovely. I'll just share screen.
There we go. That's with us, Georgia. Members, I do think when we do have a presentation, if everybody else takes their cameras down, I think it makes it easier for us to pick up Georgia as well. So if everybody's happy to take their cameras down and de-mic or whatever the terminology for that is, it'll make presentation a little bit easier for Georgia. Georgia, do you want to take questions as you go through or save them for the end?
I'm happy either way. So if somebody pops a hand up at some point, the whole purpose of this today is to talk through what our secondary school improvement strategy is for information and sort of talk about the actions and progress that we've made so far this year. But if anybody has any questions, I've tried to limit the acronyms as much as possible as well, so that people are, because we have a lot of those in education. So I'm happy to just be paused at if any point as questions come. Otherwise, you're just going to have my voice for a period of time.
Georgie, just before you start, rather rude of me, Councillor Pete, is there anything that you wish to say before we do our presentation or not?
No, all I would have been doing would be introduce Georgie as you had.
Okay, cool.
Nothing more than that.
That's absolutely fine. Georgie,
you,
proceed away. And I notice it is Georgie, not Georgia, as I was saying it. So fire away, Georgie.
Diolch yn fawr, thank you. Prynhawn da, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you the Powys Secondary School Improvement Strategy today. Throughout this presentation, I'll talk through the different priorities, the success criteria that were developed alongside them, and the progress that we've made this year against each of those priorities. I'm afraid there is a lot of information on the slides, but it does explain the strategy in detail. So for us, the first element was following the Powys County Council Estin visit in 2019. The first recommendation focused on improving standards in secondary schools and especially the performance of our more able learners. Other recommendations were linked to our secondary schools, but this recommendation was the foundation for the development of our secondary school improvement strategy. So how was it developed? The secondary school improvement strategy was developed by an internal task and finish group, and this group included LA officers, secondary head teachers, and external consultants. As part of its development, the officers and consultants worked collaboratively to develop overarching principles and actions within each priority to support the realisation of the success criteria. We've got those various steps. The plan was shared with Estin both during the monitoring phase and updated in line with the completion of the follow-up activities. Both the strategic and operational board have been established to support the realisation of the strategy, capture the work undertaken, and the progress being made against each of the priorities. So the vision for the secondary school improvement strategy, the development and implementation of the secondary school improvement strategy is one of the key stepping stones to achieving the ambitious vision for Powys. An integral part of this strategy, in line with Education in Wales, the national mission, is to encourage and promote that collaboration between our secondary schools, share good practice, innovate and improve in order to achieve the highest possible standards whilst moving towards a high achieving, self-improving LA. It will also aim to develop excellence in teaching and learning and ensure that those effective practices are embedded across all secondary schools, ensure effective, secure and sustainable leadership across our secondary schools, encourage collaboration, professional learning and innovation within the secondary sector based on developing each school as their own learning organisation, and secure those short-term supportive interventions for improvement in the schools that require those immediate steps. The implementation of this strategy will drive sustainable school improvement. It will be guided by effective self-evaluation and improvement planning and provide all leaders with that necessary support to improve. This will lead to a network of excellent schools working with a collaborative environment to spread excellence across our secondary sector and hopefully beyond. In addition, the emphasis is placed on continuous school improvement, sharing and learning from each other at a whole school, department level, and where possible at a regional level. In relation to leadership and teaching and learning and the curriculum, its implementation will address the 7 dimensions of the schools as a learning organisation, which is referred to often in education as the SLO. So it's developing a shared vision.
Okay. I found this on the web for mentions of the schools of the learning organisation, which...
Sorry, that was Siri, my end. So developing a shared vision centred on the learning of all learners, creating and supporting continuous learning opportunities for all staff, promoting that team learning and collaboration amongst staff, establishing a culture of inquiry, innovation and exploration, embedding those systems for collecting and exchanging knowledge for learning, learning with and from the external environment and wider learning system, and finally modelling and growing learning leadership. The strategy will also address the following criteria, and these are often used to describe a high-performing LA. So positive LA and school working relationships, where those schools leads on standards with LA providing high quality professional support and challenge. Schools that have robust self-improvement systems and the LAs work alongside them to quality assure those systems and outcomes. The LA is effective in supporting and challenging roles and with the capacity to identify, share and broker accepted good practice. The LA, alongside the schools, is a self-improving system which empowers the schools to collaborate, improve and innovate to achieve the highest possible standards for our learners. The LA will have a good understanding of its schools, working practices and the standards achieved. So we've broken the secondary school improvement strategy down into different priorities. Priority 1A is school to school professional collaboration. And the overarching principles of this priority were to establish an effective collaborative school to school working model, provide a well-planned professional learning offer, provide a focus for each collaboration, including teaching and learning, skills, and vulnerable learners, such as the more able and talented or our additional learning needs. Provide a clear structure to the collaborative work based on the professional inquiry cycle, and provide a platform to share emerging practice and learning from each collaboration. Success criteria were then established to support the evaluation and realization of the school-to-school professional collaboration. First one was that all secondary head teachers and senior leaders would work together to effectively establish school-to-school collaboration by working in triads or quads to build that productive professional relationship and engage in the professional learning program, which supports the developing needs of each collaboration in line with their individual school development plans. Standards of teaching and learning experiences judged at least good across all Powys secondary schools. Improved provision and pedagogical practices evident across all Powys schools, resulting in a stronger progress and standards of literacy, numeracy and digital literacy skills for all our learners. And improved leadership, provision and pedagogical practices evident across the Powys secondary schools. So priority 1B was professional learning. The overarching principles that this priority were to lead to was to provide a 2-year professional learning programme that supported the development of all leaders across all of our secondary schools. Adapt and develop the professional learning offer in line with the needs of the workforce and the school improvement priorities. Provide professional learning opportunities for senior leaders, which enabled the development of professional learning communities and a space to evaluate the improved teaching and learning strategies and whole school skill development. It also provides professional learning and networking opportunities for middle leaders, such as those that lead on the different areas of learning experiences through the various network meetings. The success criteria that were developed to support the evaluation of the work against this priority are as below. A relevant and appropriate up-to-date professional learning programme for all leaders is well established and supported by officers. All leaders fully engage with that professional learning offer and actively participate in collaborative improvement and sharing of identified good practice. All leaders actively implement actions and key messages from that professional learning offer, and as a result, they effectively lead improving pedagogical practices and provision for literacy, numeracy, and digital, both at a faculty or department level and across the whole school. Improved leadership at all levels demonstrates open, accurate, and effective evaluation and improvement planning across all of our schools. Leaders at all levels have successfully engaged in valuable professional development, which informs improved provision, standards, care and support, and leadership. Improved provision and pedagogical practices evidence across all of our Powys secondary schools, resulting in stronger progress and standards of literacy, numeracy, and digital, as well as final outcomes for all learners being improved. All Powys secondary schools have engaged with professional learning opportunities. The professional learning has been co-constructed with the schools and the LA being equal partners and as part of that implementation of the partnership working and the collaboration. This is strengthened between the local authority and its secondary school settings, resulting in strong collaborative work relationship. Schools have been grouped into those triads for evaluation, for improvement, pedagogy and professional inquiry. And all school leaders believe that they are benefiting from that collaboration, sharing of practice and professional learning. Most schools have valued the opportunities to work collaboratively, but find releasing staff for all of the networks to be quite difficult, particularly with the COVID pandemic. All schools continue to develop an accurate, effective evaluation and improvement planning. A comprehensive professional learning offer has been organised for senior middle leaders for the next academic year. Are there any questions there, Chair, before I carry on?
Members, anything so far? No, it looks as if everybody's taking it all in, Georgie.
Okay, diolch yn fawr.
Gwynfer, sorry, I think both Margaret and myself have got.
Oh, apologies, I'm not picking them up on mine. Okay, I've got you now. I've just okay, Lucy and Margaret. Lucy first, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Georgie. I just really wanted to ask a bit more about the success criteria and how these are going to be measured and how smart they are, because just listening to this, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of information, but I find it hard to just identify, you know, sort of quickly how you are going to be able to say, yes, we've definitely achieved that, that's working.
To capture the progress and inform the success criteria, you're absolutely right. They're very high level statements, and across all of our secondaries, that's going to be a task of work to pull that together. It's not going to be a one-year solution either. It's going to take a little bit of time. So one of the things is we're working with schools to measure against their school improvement priorities, which would link to this. So everything that you would imagine a secondary school is focusing on is built within this secondary school improvement strategy at the point in time it was written. So from that perspective, we would be capturing a variety of evidence. The schools would as well. Our job is to work alongside them to evaluate the evidence they're collecting, but also that would inform our forward planning, our succession planning. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about at the end is the next steps from where we've got to after this first year. if that helps with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Margaret, please. Are you with us, Margaret? Your microphone's still, are you able to?
Yes, sorry.
There we go.
This has been very difficult for everyone to actually implement things and actually take on board so much in the difficult circumstances. And, you know, people are really working so hard to allow as much as possible to happen. To start with, because of all those constraints, would you say that you are happy with where it's got to now at this point? And how are the profession feeling? You say there's a new initiative for next year and further training. Now, have sufficient people signed up for that? Has it engaged the profession to feel that they are really a part of this and want to be very involved?
I'm new to Powys. I came in February, and it's been the first thing that schools, secondary schools particularly, have spoken to me about, is the value, how much value they've put on this collaborative opportunity. I think it's done a lot of good work during a very tough time to build those relationships between the schools with each other, as well as with council officers. I think in the last year, we've managed to do touch point visits because of the pressures and the COVID pandemic restrictions to see where schools are at. And that's what we've gone on to do. And in this summer term, and I'll talk about this later in the presentation, we've done skills visits. In terms of the progress that we've made, there is confidence in the professional learning. Staff have acknowledged that. It's now about that next step of working with them to hone that learning and into practice. So that is where we are. In terms of the schools, we've developed a head teacher strategy group. They're very keen on the proposals around that our professional learning offer has gone out well in advance to supplement their own directed time calendars. They're keen for us to be working alongside them in school because of all of the things that have affected where schools potentially are now, and the different potential support models that we are going to work with them to develop. So I'd say we've got that buy-in from the schools. Right. We've got that working relationship with those schools. And now it's about building on that to continue to meet the success criteria of this strategy, but also use the evidence we've collected in this last 6 weeks over the summer to really evaluate if the secondary school improvement strategy is right now after 2 years of COVID.
Don't have to, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. Councillor Matt, followed by Councillor Liz.
Yes, thank you for your presentation so far, Georgie. I've just got one question, sort of coming from it as a perspective of somebody who works in education as well. How are we going to find adequate time within the sort of academic year to incorporate this? Because once, you know, we sort of get into the run of teaching, it's very difficult to find space within that sort of run to have these sorts of meetings. And also the other concern would potentially be on the workload of staff as well. As we know at the moment, staff in the teaching sector nationwide are sort of stretched to their limits post COVID. So how is this being worked in terms of a workload to ensure that we're not further overburdening staff, please?
Well, the two main elements are how we've worked really closely with head teachers around the professional learning offer. So it's not an extra, we're providing the support, particularly around the curriculum for Wales, either through insets, which is again easing the pressure a little bit on the senior leaders in schools that would be developing that resources. We're working collaboratively with the clusters, but ultimately we've got the time to, if you like, get the expertise in hand around some of the elements so that we can relay that information to schools and leaders. So that's been really positively received. We're staggering the insets next year so that all of the Powys team can support each cluster with their professional development, their learning journey, their school improvement journey. The other element is that this year we've had to carry out visits to just check where everyone is. You're absolutely right. The majority of them have been around wellbeing and checking how our head teachers, our leaders, our staff are managing with the COVID pressures of supply, etc. But moving forward over the summer, we're finalising the school support models so that we can ensure that support you get is bespoke to your need as a school. And actually, it's not in addition. So if you had a quality assurance calendar, for example, to look at a specific element of teaching, the school improvement advisor would be in there working alongside you on your timeline. It's not an added extra, but
Okay.
it's more of a coaching and mentoring model. It's not being done to them. It will be done alongside them, and it will be built into their structures and plans.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Georgie.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Mark. Councillor Liz.
Oh, thank you, Georgie. My question's about outcomes, really, and I can see that, you know, this is the strategy and you've got the methods being set out in terms of how you're going to achieve better outcomes. But I wondered a bit further down the line whether there'd be an opportunity to present, you know, to this committee, for example, some real life examples of the difference this has made. And you started the presentation talking about outcome one, you know, improving standards, and particularly for more able learners. And, you know, I don't know about others, but I'd just be keen to see what difference, you know, this might make going forward. And I appreciate it's early days and it's still a bit embryonic. But would that be something that you have in mind for the future?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things I've built into the presentation is for you to see where the research has said skills, for example, might be because of COVID. So we'll be able to measure against some of that progress from as this work continues. I think the other element to it is this is the first time now children are sitting GCSEs and A levels again in secondaries. Schools are still unsure as to where they are compared to previous years. But ultimately, we wouldn't be realizing the strategy if we weren't measuring against it. So it is very important that as we move forward, those measures are in place and we capture that progress and that, for example, that those good case studies, and if needs be, refine the strategy from our learning. And that comes back to my point of us analysing what we captured this term, because we may not have everything in this strategy that we need right now because it was written, you know, in 2019. And things have significantly changed in schools since then. So, but no, that is the long-term plan. And all of the work we'll be doing will be capturing impact that we're having as a service on him helping our schools to improve. Ultimately, it's a self-improving system that we want all of our schools to be involved in and included in. But we've got to be mindful that sometime we'll be working alongside them to develop that capacity within our leaders and our practitioners. So we will capture that as we move on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Liz. Thanks you, Georgie. No further questions, Georgie, so happy for you to move on.
Lovely, diolch yn fawr. So priority 2, improving the quality of teaching and learning. The overarching principles of this priority were to improve the pedagogy by developing the outstanding leadership programme within the cluster, establish and embed that peer working through the triads and the professional inquiry, and as part of priority 1B, establish those professional learning communities which develop that innovation in the pedagogy. The success criteria that were developed for improving the quality of teaching and learning were listed below. So improved provision and pedagogical practices becomes evident across the above schools, resulting in stronger progress and standards. All teachers to identify improved practice as a result of the outstanding teacher programme, such as effective questioning, challenging of learners and assessment. All learners that have taken part in the outstanding teacher programme are able to identify improved provision and standards, particularly for the more able and talented learners. And all trained outstanding teacher programme practitioners will maintain the good practice developed during the programme. So on this slide here, we've captured the progress made through the previously identified actions. So nearly all clusters have taken part in the Outstanding Teacher Programme. Most high schools have at least 2 Outstanding Teacher Programme trained practitioners. Primary schools have also taken part in the programme and have 1 trained OTP practitioner. Nearly all teachers have taken part, have been able to explain how the programme has allowed them to reflect and develop on their own teaching strategies. Many teachers have shared the OTP strategies with their colleagues, either in their school or across their cluster. It is in its very early stage and it does need to be further embedded across each school and the cluster. And all of those schools need to develop a consistent strategy for developing pedagogy. 8 facilitators from Powys have now been identified and they'll be undertaking training so that they can deliver the OTP programme across Powys schools in September 2022. So our next priority was improving standards in numeracy. The overarching principles of the priority were to establish a collaborative approach to improving the teaching and learning of numeracy across the curriculum, enable a focus on numeracy pedagogy and the development of learners' numeracy skills, and provide bespoke professional learning to senior leaders and numeracy leads to roll out their whole school numeracy vision. And I think it's really important that I emphasize here, we're going to look at numeracy, literacy, and digital. This is not maths teaching, this is numeracy across the curriculum, just as it won't be English teaching or Welsh teaching, it's English or Welsh literacy across the curriculum. So those skills in other subjects. So the success criteria for improving the standards in numeracy are that all schools have effective leadership of the development of numeracy across the curriculum. They have a clear understanding of what good standards of numeracy look like using the National Numeracy Framework. Nearly all learners are able to transfer those mathematical skills across the curriculum in a variety of contexts. Nearly all learners can make good progress in the application of their numeracy skills to commensurate their mathematical ability. All schools have strategies in place to develop learners' numeracy progressively, and all schools have developed strategies for teachers to develop numeracy where appropriate across their subject. So this is one of the first slides where I'm going to talk about what the research tells us on skills because of the impact of COVID. So researchers found that extended periods away from school have negatively affected the mathematical performance of most learners. More upsettingly, as with other evidence, the effect is more noticeable in the more vulnerable learners. There's also evidence to indicate that regression has been seen more in boys than girls at all achievement levels. Practitioners have also seen a regression in numerical fact recall, which then affects new learning because those building blocks aren't necessarily there. But as always, the biggest factor relating to mathematical performance is confidence. And across all ability ranges, there's been a noticeable drop in mathematical confidence, which can then intensify that maths anxiety that a lot of young people and adults suffer with. So the progress we've made in the last year, all numeracy leads from our secondary schools have worked together in triads to present their different approaches to numeracy. And included within that work has been a secondary school that was recently inspected by Estin, and their numeracy approach was seen as a strength. Schools have been asked to evaluate their current provision, standards and leadership and share this with us as a local authority so that we'll have a clearer picture by the end of this academic year. So that would have been with us by yesterday. This will also enable us to identify areas for development which we can then bespoke to each secondary school. We've also carried out summer term skills visits, and they have had a focus on numeracy as well as literacy and digital. So priority 4 was to improve standards in literacy. The overarching principles of this priority were to establish the collaborative approach to improving the teaching and learning of literacy across the curriculum, enable a focus on improving specific literacy pedagogies, such as a reading behaviour strategy. And then that strategy will then progress on to oracy and writing strategies, which will aid all teachers to develop a working knowledge of how to improve learners' literacy skills across the curriculum. Their purpose as well was to provide bespoke professional learning to senior leaders and literacy leads to roll out their whole school literacy vision. The success criteria that will be used to measure the progress against literacy include all schools having effective leadership of literacy across their subject areas. All schools have a clear understanding of what good standards of literacy look like, including oracy, reading and writing, based on the expectations of the literacy framework. Most learners apply their reading skills effectively across the curriculum. The hope is that all schools will have consistent strategies in place to develop learners' literacy skills progressively across all curriculum areas. All schools have effective diagnostic tracking systems in reading that ensures that most learners make good progress. Most learners have the expected progress in oracy, reading and writing in line with the new progression steps that sit within the adapted literacy framework. Most learners listen and speak effectively across the curriculum, and most learners write effectively across the curriculum. As with numeracy, there has been significant impacts on literacy development following the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns. Many secondary learners lacked resilience in reading and writing, as well as a regression in their oracy and communication skills on returning to school after the lockdowns. There's also been a noticeable regression in handwriting and the ability to develop extended pieces of writing. The 2022 Education Endowment Foundation report stated that a recent study showed particular negative impacts on reading for secondary school learners. And as expected, different outcomes have emerged as further research has been carried out. But one piece by No More Marking in October 2020 evidenced that children's writing skills and suggested that a new Year 7 cohort were 22 months behind where they would have been, and that the gender gap is in favour of girls has increased further, as has the gap between our most vulnerable learners and their peers. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has also significantly affected the Welsh medium literacy of our learners. And this was captured in a July 2021 Welsh Government report that stated the significant impact on the Welsh medium provision during the lockdowns, particularly for the learners who lived in non-Welsh speaking households. One of the main findings of the research was that in most schools, schools did communicate bilingually with the parents and guardians of the learners in both the Welsh medium and the bilingual sector. But when setting the work, and in a number of instances, parents were unable to support the work because the work itself was in the medium of Welsh. So following this research, Welsh Government have made 17 recommendations to support the disadvantaged learners in the Welsh medium streams. We've captured the progress here that we've made against our literacy priorities. So literacy leads from each of the secondary schools have been divided into triads to receive training from our external consultants on the literacy strategies for reading and oracy. Those triads have stimulated a greater collaboration between our literacy coordinators across our schools, and they've been able to share good practice in developing those learners' literacy skills. All of the triads have been trained in the reading behaviours programme. The schools have appreciated the implementation of a reading programme and understand that the implementation of such a programme will add greater depth to their learners' literacy skills. And our summer visits have included a focus on the literacy elements of skill development. Our final priority was improving digital learning. The overarching principles of this priority were to establish a collaborative approach to improve the teaching and learning of digital literacy across the curriculum, enable a focus on improving specific digital pedagogies and skills such as knowledge, attitudes of learning, and enabling our young people to be confident, creative, and critically use technologies and systems in an increasingly digital world. As well as that, this enabled us to provide bespoke professional learning to senior leaders and digital leads to roll out their whole school digital vision now and further as the digital platform and landscape changes. The success criteria we'll use to evaluate the work we've done against this digital priority will include schools having an effective leadership of a digital literacy across their subject areas, all clusters having a well-considered transition plan with a strong focus on continued progress in learner digital literacy. All schools have a good understanding of the digital literacy strands, which is citizenship, producing, data and computational thinking. And these are based on the National Digital Competence Framework. All schools developed digital literate strategies to develop learners' digital skills progressively. All schools will have effective diagnostic systems in digital literacy, which will ensure most learners make good progress, and most learners have access across all schools demonstrate valuable literacy skills that can effectively use and apply their digital literacy skills independently across the curriculum. So even though all our digital skills have significantly improved throughout the COVID pandemic, this has also led to some significant challenges, such as the ineffective development of digital skills and misconceptions regarding digital skills and digital literacy. There's a significant difference between the use of digital technology to enhance a learning experience and a development of the digital competence skills. Here we've captured the progress that we've made against this year against the previously identified actions. Over the course of the last 2 academic years, significant professional development for teachers' digital skills has been a priority for the Powys secondary schools, and we've needed it to ensure that education continued through the remote learning periods. Digital leaders were brought together to share their schools' approaches to delivering the digital competence framework. There's also been termly cross-county network meetings to support the DCF, but also ensure greater collaboration and support and sharing of resources and strategies for the new digital GCSE. And many schools have attended these meetings. The summer terms have also included a focus on digital teaching schools and digital literacy. So what are our next steps? We've appointed a secondary school improvement team who will begin their work in September to work alongside our secondary leaders in schools and provide that bespoke subject support as well as the leadership support that I previously mentioned. This is a necessity due to the dissolution of ERU, as they had previously provided the secondary school improved support. As a team, we're going to review and adapt the secondary school improvement strategy in line with the recent school improvement guidance that's been shared with us and the impact of the COVID pandemic has had on secondary schools and their learners. As I alluded to earlier, there's been additional challenges and things that we possibly hadn't factored in 2 years ago. Well, 3 years ago now. We've got challenges around mental health in our young people, emotional development is not where it should be in some cases. We've also got attendance issues, which will affect all of the things that are already captured within the secondary school improvement strategy. We've carried out summer term visits, and as part of those visits, we've had a real focus on skill development across the curriculum. And over the summer, we're going to evaluate all of those reports and ensure that this could lead to a more bespoke secondary school improvement model, but also lead to the relevant changes in our secondary school improvement strategy where needed. Following this summer term analysis, we will adapt the secondary school model to ensure it is far more bespoke to individual school needs through an effective coaching and mentoring model. Any questions from anybody? And I'm going to stop sharing now.
There you go, folks. Any questions to add to that? We've got Councillor Jeremy's first up.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just a couple of questions. You mentioned that the COVID pandemic had caused a big delay in learning. I think you mentioned 22 months sort of behind, and that's I mean 22 months is nearly 2 years, so that's quite significant given it was the length of the pandemic, really. But was that a national statistic? And do you know whether Powys was better or worse than that? Did Powys perform worse than the national or better in terms of the COVID? And the second question is just, you mentioned these summer term visits. Can you just say a bit more about what they are?
Yep, absolutely. So no, that research was one element of the research we've begun to gather around COVID, and it's coming through at different points because more and more people are seeing where the impact on skills has been since returning to school. They've been back a year, and some of the research is alluding to the fact that actually that gap's significantly reducing now. In terms of that was a UK piece of research. That wasn't a Welsh piece of research. In terms of
sorry, go on.
Sorry. In terms of Powys, we haven't compared that to nationally. What we've done with the summer term visits now is we've used ESTIN guidance as well as experience that we've had in other areas around skills to capture a pack to support schools how the different elements of skill development, leadership, etc. And we've worked with schools during these visits to capture a baseline of where we are with skills in POWIS. So we will now know where we are with literacy, where we are with numeracy, and where we are with digital. And then that is going to be what we analyse. Literally, we've just finished them this week, what we analyse to ensure the support we provide helps narrow those gaps that we've been referred to.
But what physically does the summer visit comprise?
Okay, so I was a numeracy specialist. I'm a math teacher of 20 years. So I was involved as the lead for numeracy. So I met with the senior leadership team regarding their vision for numeracy and the actions they've taken. I met with the numeracy lead and the head of maths to determine their mapping of numeracy across the curriculum, how they're quality assuring it, and what provision is currently being offered. I also met with learners to discuss how they felt around numeracy, and I looked at books, and in some cases we did go into lessons and see lessons being taught so that we could capture the skill in action, if you like. We're producing a FADE report, which stands for Focus, Analysis, Do and Evaluation. The Do is our recommendations now for those leads in school. So every skills lead has got a FADE report that they can use to inform their development planning for the next year. So then we'll come back in the autumn term to work with them to evaluate their progress against those recommendations.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Jeremy. I've lost my hands up at the moment. There we go. Right, we're followed by Margaret and then Councillor Brune.
Thank you. That was really interesting. And one thing that didn't appear or only appeared once was something that I didn't see in all the rest of the presentation regarding the three areas, was about transition, because the new curriculum is a continuum, and it's so important that that transition and that liaison and that work between primary and secondary is so vital.
Absolutely.
And they need to be working together. Now, I didn't, I saw no mention of it, except in digital literacy. I think there was considered a transition plan. Well-considered transition plan was one of the things. So I was just highlighting that, really, because it concerned me. That was all, because I think we're missing something if we're not looking at that along with.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the cluster, the insets are clusters. So focus on them is around transition. And one of the things we did speak to on the summer term visits was, for example, if you've got a literacy strategy, is it what your primaries do as well? Or do the children learn reading in a different way, or learn their long multiplication in a different way?
And
so
they
we've included,
want to be repeating things.
Exactly.
Yes, and I think that's really a vital element. The other issue that I wanted to just mention, you say the demise of ERU and there is something new now in place. Can I just flag up, not to you, but as a general comment, that in the past, in a long while back with scrutiny, we always had ERU coming to talk to scrutiny and update us, certainly probably annually. And so it was that I was just flagging up.
Thank you.
Not at the moment, but just an issue that
And we have established the Mid Wales Partnership, but within that structure, each county has their own school improvement team. So that's why it's different to how it was with ERU. So, but I certainly envisage that we'll and be presenting on progress around the Mid Wales Partnership as well as we move forward.
Can I just come in there?
Come on, Lynette,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Margaret. Absolutely. We did have scrutiny, as you say, when we were part of the ERU region, and I think it would be really good for this scrutiny committee. We do have a business plan that's gone to Welsh Government for the Mid Wales Partnership, and we do have targets within that plan, that business plan around school improvement. And it really does align as well with the secondary school improvement strategy. So I think going forward, Chair and Councillor Peake, portfolio holder, I think the Mid Wales Partnership, bringing that plan and progress to scrutiny at some time in the future would be beneficial, and we would welcome that.
Yeah, no, absolutely fine with that. Yeah, that would be very useful. Councillor Bryn.
Excuse me, Chair, is it possible to come in at that point? Because I just wanted to make a point about transition.
Of course it is, Irene. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, thank you for that. Thank you, Margaret, for the comments as well. Although transition isn't necessarily mentioned in the second strand, which is teaching and learning, what we did was made sure that our primary and secondary schools worked as a cluster on the Levy training project, so that we got our teachers together from our secondary and our primary schools, working across that cluster, so they all have the same understanding of that, you know, outstanding teacher, what they should be doing, the kind of strategies they should be using, so that then becomes part of the learning for those children that progress through the primary school into the secondary school, so they're getting the same kind of approaches in that. So that's what we've tried to do. I know it doesn't mention transition there, but it was very much in our thinking, because we wanted to bridge that gap, especially from the year 5 through to year 8. That area there, that transition point between Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, and this is the way we've tried to do that. It's also challenging our more able pupils, because it's the use of the language, the use of the questioning through the Outstanding Teacher Programme that's stretching those as well. But it's helping our teachers from primary and secondary actually get together and talk about teaching. And I think that's so important. Sorry, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay,
Irene. Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks for upgrading us there. Councillor Bryn.
Hi, yeah. Hi, thanks, Georgie, very good. I got he got a background in numeracy as well. If I were to say the fact is that 80% of our children after 11 years of education leave Powys schools completely illiterate, would you understand what I'm talking about?
So which age did you say they were leaving from? From the age of
well,
year 11?
At 16 years old, they
At
leave
16.
schools, 80% of them are entirely illiterate.
That's not that wouldn't be mirrored in their outcomes with their GCSEs across Powys, though, would it?
Well, you know, what I'm talking about is that they, when you're talking about literacy, you're talking about English language literacy.
No, I'm not. I referred to the...
Well, the 80% of the children have no literacy worth speaking about in the Welsh language. They don't learn to speak the language. They can't read with confidence. They can't understand, listen with confidence in the Welsh language. It's there are many priorities listed, but the one priority which should have been listed for, well, over 50 years ago and more, is the development of proper bilingual education in Powys. So when you present statistics with respect to literacy, perhaps could I kindly ask you that you split them up and divide them and say Welsh language literacy and standards of understanding and reading across the cohort in Powys, and English language literacy, because they're two completely different fields of exercise, and people might start to appreciate how much priority is given to English language education as opposed to bilingual education.
I'm sorry, Councillor Bryn, we did include Welsh literacy in our visits. I haven't mentioned that, but that was a focus of our visits, particularly in our dual stream schools or Welsh medium schools.
Well, no, but it needs to be reflected across all schools. You know, Welsh language literacy from not, you know, there are many things given priority in Powys. I mean, you talk about digital competency and stuff. Great, fantastic. I mean, computers only came into schools in the 1980s, and there's, it's now given priority, which Welsh language education has never been given in Powys. So I think, you know, that's the point I'm trying to make. And I appreciate it if those statistics are given, and every time literacy is mentioned as a general subject, well, most of this conversation has been English literacy. otherwise the statistics don't make sense.
Okay, Jochen Val, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn. I think we grasped your point there. Councillor Ian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Geordie, for the presentation. There's an awful lot of information in there. It's the first time I've seen any of this today, so there's quite a few questions, and I'd rather sort of take this back if possible. Hopefully we can get a presentation sent to us, and we'd be prepared to take any further questions after this. Really, that's probably the best way for me to go forward. I mean, it sounds to me as though this has been quite a long time in the pipeline. Is that right? You know,
It was certainly put together in 2019, and
yeah, okay.
and as things have evolved, that was, it was written alongside schools, and really this year has, with the impact of COVID and not really being in schools, this year is the first time everybody's been back in for a year, give or take, the children being in and out and staff. So it's enabled us to just try and capture, progress at points this year. It's not as comprehensive as we would continue to do, because we've been very conscious of staff well-being at this point in time. So now it will be more alongside staff and with them. I think it's fair to say that we had some significantly experienced, well-respected people that developed the original strategy. There was external consultants, people that are well-respected by Estin and our schools, and some of them are former heads of ours as well, and areas of our leaders. So I think it was written at the time, and I think the point is the world has changed quite significantly since the point it was written, and that's why we need to go back and evaluate it as well and check that it's captured everything that we now know is a challenge for secondary schools moving forward.
Yeah, great, and I hope that's where we can come in with any other further questions,
Absolutely.
comments, concerns, suggestions, or whatever, and hopefully you can take those on board. I mean, the only thing I would say at the moment, this is touching a little bit on what Councillor Matt raised earlier, and that is how much time teachers can spend doing what's expected of them in this now. And the concern is always, I suppose, is whether that's going to therefore mean that they got less time to be actually doing what they're supposed to be doing as teaching children, rather than actually trying to figure out how they're supposed to be teaching children, which I always thought should be perhaps sort of something that's, given from above rather. We seem to be sort of doing it the wrong way around. It seems to me as though we're trying to get all our teachers to be telling everybody else how they want to teach the children rather than teaching the children. And, we should, from my opinion, we should be having a sort of, a curriculum that's suitable for all schools, and they just be told to get on with it rather than all schools be trying to basically get to one solution at the end of the day. It seems back to front.
The curriculum for Wales does enable a more localized learning, which is really important, and gives the children the sort of the connection to their environment and Wales and further afield. It's not that people are being taught to teach now. They were taught, and things have evolved and changed. I can tell you that as a maths teacher. There are significantly better ways you should teach elements of mathematics now that didn't exist 20 years ago when I trained. So it's professional development. It is an expectation. If a school is a true learning organisation, they would constantly be learning and professional learners. All teachers are leaders of learning and teachers of skills. And I think it's fair to say that our teachers know that in Powys. That's been clear from the conversations we've had on our visits. The work is not in addition. If you're a leader, you get leadership time in your working week. So we would help in that time. It's not an added addition. That's how it'll be balanced. And the professional learning offer was again given out early, and there's also consultation on an additional inset at the moment from Welsh Government to further support staff and teachers with balancing, like you say, the day-to-day and their own professional development, because it is important that they have that professional development as they grow as teachers and leaders.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you. But I think ultimately, if we can just have a copy of this
Yeah.
and then take any further questions after that, then. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ian. Councillor Matt.
Oh, thank you. Just coming again with my sort of further ed, higher ed hat onto this. Two things sort of stand out from the presentation, and it's two things that we've grappled with in the higher education sector for a number of years now, looking particularly at first year students, one of which is the attainment gap, because you made reference in your presentation about the gap between those pupils coming from perhaps more affluent backgrounds against those who are coming from more vulnerable, / poorer backgrounds. So my first question is, is there any sort of projects, etc., being done at secondary level to try and close that gap, because these are still gaps that we're seeing sort of in FE and HE, and I suppose the same would go for the awarding gap as well between white students and students from BAME backgrounds as well. And my second question as well is that, has there been any thought in terms of the priorities, having a priority specifically focusing on developing pupils' confidence and well-being? I know the purpose of the new curriculum for Wales is, as you say, to give more localised learning and to help sort of students almost develop and take control of a curriculum for themselves. But what we're finding increasingly more in further and higher ed is that a lot of students come into those sectors and they haven't got the confidence in their own abilities. They're not independent learners, and what we're finding we're having to do is, almost when they get to university level, we're having to teach them as if we were teaching them at secondary level or at college level, and their first year is more of that sort of experience to help them with a transition to that. So I just wonder if this strategy is sort of thinking about ways as to how we can get back to a place where, the sort of the pathway through secondary education is to increase their confidence, to help them become more independent learners.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those elements obviously have been affected by the pandemic. The attainment gap, one of the things we've purchased for the region is the RADI approach, raising attainment of disadvantaged young people. And there's a suite of offer, and we will be supporting our secondaries and primaries with that. We've purchased it for all of our schools for the next 2 years. So part of that will be developing those key pedagogical strategies that support our most disadvantaged learners. We're also just recently agreed a development group internally within the team to focus on raising the attainment of the disadvantaged learners. We've appointed one of the secondary school improvement advisors is a health and wellbeing lead. So they will support with RADI, emotional coaching, all of those elements that we know. But it does come back to my original point that there are things we now know we need in this strategy that we probably didn't necessarily need as much as we need now. And also, as part of the visits, on the skills visits, we have looked at different elements around health and wellbeing across the year, but also what does intervention look like, and the strategies that you're teaching these learners, particularly in skills, how do they enable independence? So they've been linked to recommendations we've made back to schools as well following these visits.
Oh, great. Thank you, Georgia. That's positive news.
Okay. Jochen Bow.
Thank you.
Come in there, Chair, as well, please.
Yes, Sally, go ahead, Sally.
Thank you. Just to say, a member of my team, Mary Strong, a lead for wellbeing and equalities, has also been working closely with schools and clusters in a team around the cluster approach to support a whole school approach to mental health and emotional wellbeing. And some of those issues, Councillor Matt, that you were referring to around resilience, emotional literacy, really being able to cope with what the world and education is throwing at them, hugely influenced by some of those strategies we've been trying to put in place with clusters and with learners to make sure that they are able to transition into the world of work or into higher education with the resilience and that sort of emotional literacy that they need to deal with that. So yeah, it's a big piece of work that we've been doing as well this year.
Thank you, Sally, for helping out there. Councillor Liz next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Georgie. My question has actually been partly answered, but it was about the COVID pandemic and the learning gap. And what I wanted to ask was whether there's any bespoke plans in place at a localised level to identify individual children that have been affected, in this way, particularly in relation to the attainment gap. And I think you've answered that in part, and I think also Sally said a little bit. So if there is anything else you want to say, but otherwise I think it is probably a bigger question, maybe for this committee to, have some more detailed information on at another time.
One of the things we've identified is the need to have a focus on attendance and inclusion, and that generally often is the more vulnerable learners that are affected. So with the plan is to support schools with their support to be as inclusive as possible, using some of the strategies that Mary's already been working on them with, share some good practice from our other schools around that. One program that Hayley's got a couple of pilots on is a nurture program and looking at a behaviour policy from year 5 to year 8 to try and support those learners, particularly the more vulnerable learners, as they come up into high school with the behaviour policy. Often it gets a bit overwhelming in year 7 for them because it can be quite different. So that's a piece of work as well that we're doing. But we have identified that because we've also got attendance figures, and we're seeing, concerns there around some of the more vulnerable learners and their attendance. So we have got a plan for that as well.
Thank you, Georgie. Sally, once again.
Just to come in there again, actually, one of the collaborations as part of the secondary school improvement strategy was around well-being. So we had groups of leaders across our secondary schools coming together, and they agreed collectively as a group that they would all carry out the Schools Health Research Network survey, the SHRN survey, which gives us really useful data about the kinds of difficulties learners are facing across Powys, and we're the first local authority, I believe, to have all our schools, our secondary schools, involved in that strategy. And as a result, we've been asked to pilot some work with Cardiff University around a sort of LA approach to using the Schools Health Research Network survey, so that not only will individual schools get their feedback, but as a local authority, we'll get a holistic feedback of the key issues that are problematic for schools across the authority, so that we can, again, tailor our support for those common needs as well, and so that multiplier effect of working on problems together. So, and that's come directly out of this secondary school improvement strategy with the collaboration around the well-being. And that's linked to pupil voice as well, and trying to capture pupil responses to their experiences during COVID, and that's carrying on next year with the pupil voice lead chairing that wellbeing PLC that's been meeting as well, professional learning community that's been meeting as part of the secondary school improvement strategy. So really groundbreaking stuff for LAs there, I think, in terms of the Schools Health Research Network survey.
Thank you, Sally. I noticed Councillor Pete. Yeah, I'll bring you in now. I'm going to bring Hayley in first. Before Councillor Pete, I think perhaps you've got some conclusions to bring to us.
Thank you very much, Ted Yockenbauer. I just wanted to say that we've had a good run up with this in Powys, but we're really refining our provision and our support in terms of health, mental health and wellbeing. We did have a wellbeing and mental health and emotional wellbeing strategy in Powys actually before Welsh Government had brought out its whole school approach, and we've now adapted that to make sure it does, of course, fit with the whole school approach. So we preempted this really. We did some really good work, I think, as a council in terms of looking at risks, managing risks and predicting risks very early in the pandemic, working closely together, getting the team around the hub, which has now become the team around the cluster. So I think we've had a really good run up at this. And I'd like to think that our schools feel that this is an area where they have felt well supported and guided and signposted, because from the trauma-informed approach, right the way through now to the whole school approach that Mary Strong is leading on, as Sally has mentioned, there's some very good and embedded processes here now, I think, in our schools. There's always more to do, but I do think it's an area, certainly Eston felt, where we're really doing rather well and leading the way.
Thank you, Hayley. Councillor Pete, apologies, I'm going to hold you off because I think we've got one more question.
I'm happy to come in. I thought everyone had finished, which is why I put my hand up when I did.
Thank you. Councillor Britt.
Oh yeah, thanks, Gwyndwr. I just check, you have an equalities officer, who I presumably monitors equality of opportunities for children in the education system in Powys. Could you tell me when you last looked at the equality of experience that Welsh medium learners have in the county, compared, especially when it gets to secondary school? And are there been any recent audits of actual opportunities provided to Welsh medium children and compared with opportunities presented to English medium learners, especially in the secondary sectors? The primary sectors generally have bilingual schools, have very similar experiences, but has there been an audit recently of the experiences provided to Welsh medium with comparison with English medium secondary school children in Powys?
Councillor, sorry.
Go on, sorry, Georgie.
That's okay.
Anybody could pick that up.
I was just going to say, like I said, we have included the Welsh medium within our visits and that provision. And we've certainly identified that it is a potential area for further development, and also where does it fit in the secondary school improvement strategy. So it has been part of our visits in terms of the quality of the provision and the standards, but we haven't done an audit of English against Welsh medium as yet.
Yeah, could I ask that such an audit, just the comparison of opportunities provided when they have an opportunity, I'm sure it's very good, but the numbers of opportunities are extremely limited and need to be developed rapidly if possible. Thank you.
We have developed our WESP, which is in its final stages, and that's part of the transformation programme as well. But our WESP has been developed in line with the need to develop the Welsh medium provision and ensure that we're aiming towards the national targets regarding the amount of Welsh speakers as well.
That would be lovely, and we'd like to see some actual delivery on WESPs for a change. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Diolch, Brian. Pete, good opportunity to get in now. So, Councillor Pete.
Thanks, Chair. On this one, I'm not actually going to say much because this is mainly with the officers today, because it's such a strategic but operational area of conversation. But what I did want to do is go back to something Councillor Jeremy said right at the start of the discussion around what's the purposes and the benefits of these visits, as well as the strategic work. This has enabled our officers to get in and hold the first of what used to be a regular termly meeting actually within the schools. And that's given them an opportunity to see not just the impact of the pandemic on the pupils, but also on the teaching workforce. One of the things that officers have told me in briefings afterwards, and I think this is something that's quite safe to share, is that teachers have actually put the pupils and the pupils' welfare first over and above their own welfare and their own professional development. And one of the positive things that's going to come out of these sessions is the ability for our challenge advisors to go back to the schools and work with them on the observations that they've had early in the autumn term. And that, we're hoping, will give them a chance to identify some of the areas that they need to focus on, and the fact that they need to take some time for themselves before we have ESTIN inspections, because the last thing that we want to see is the fact that teaching staff put the pupils first means they get adverse comments when inspectors come in because of their welfare concerns for the individual child, compromising their own professional development. And I know this was touched on briefly, but the message I would send to any teaching staff now that might see this or might hear from this is that we recognise the sacrifice you've made, and the central team and ourselves, councillors who are also governors, would want to send to you is we appreciate what you've done. And now coming into the new academic year, we'd like to support you as much as possible to help you catch up, because it is continuing professional development. And over the last 2 years, you have missed out as much as the pupils have. And we would emphasise to you that it is coming around to your term, and we'll support you in every way that we can. Thanks, Wimble.
Thank you, Councillor Pate. Members, any other questions now which you may have for Georgie on this secondary school strategy? No? There we go. I do tend to agree with Councillor Ian that it's quite a comprehensive lot of information. So I think if we could have that shared with us to study it in some detail, and not to give you extra words, Lord Georgie, but would you be happy to pick up further questions by email if others have some?
Absolutely. That it was a lot of detail, but we felt we needed to just share with you the strategy. So we're aware of it's a lot of information. So happy to send the presentation and take questions over email. Members, are you happy to leave this document there with those comments?
Chair, there was a question there from Councillor Lucy, but a hand up.
Is there? I'm sorry, Lucy, I've missed you there. Come on, come in.
That's all right, Chair. It wasn't so much a question, actually, it's just a comment as a school governor to say that I know that the summer visits have been appreciated and that the schools are pleased with the way that they're able to work with the local authority and the positive relationship that they feel has much improved over the past months, years. And that things are definitely on an upward trend, and that they've, well, certainly in respect of the school that I represent, I know they've been asking for more detailed feedback in terms of the response from the summer visit. So they're really keen to learn from from everything that's going on, and as you say, to work with other schools and to gain from that. So yeah, just a bit of positive feedback, I hope.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with Councillor Lucy there. Good work done by all on this. So I would agree there, and that's a good point to finish. Members, I'll move on to item 5 on your agenda is our work programme. There's detailing our work programme up till, or our meeting programmes up till Christmas. Members, just on detail within our meetings, members, I'm quite happy for anybody that wishes to suggest items for scrutiny. So much, those of you who've been on scrutiny previously, so much of our meetings have been taken up by strategy, studying strategy, school closures, etc. It's been pretty full on. So members, if you feel that there's items within the education which you wish to scrutinise, or we wish to commission officers to do some work on, please come forward with your suggestions. Let's not get bogged down with just cabinet reports, etc., etc., etc. I need to speak with Lynette at some point to see what she would like us to scrutinise, and I'll arrange a future meeting with that. But members, I'm certainly open to comment on the work programme. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to bang on, well, I have done for the last 5 years, so I'll carrying on. Part of the West programme is to develop more primary education and the knock-on effect will make more secondary education viable and all that in the Welsh medium of bilingual education. What part of the strategy is suggestion is to move those schools, some of the primary schools that are dual stream schools, to become fully bilingual for all children. Could somebody at some opportunity explain, I don't know whether it's a political decision or a technical officer's decision, what influence the county has on dual stream schools to move them up the spectrum to become bilingual for all schools? What influences are available? The impression I get is that it has to be governor-led, or the governors have to agree to. It doesn't matter whether the council wishes it to happen. It seems to be a lot of wishful thinking, basically. And I was just wondering, is it a strategy to move schools from dual stream towards fully bilingual?
Yeah, no, Bryn, it's a very good question. I'm reluctant to let the question run today, but do you think? Program, yeah. Yeah, but do you think we're talking about our work program? Should we commission some work or an answer to that, or what does the committee feel?
I'd like an answer to it. I don't know if it needs work commissioning to get an answer. Yeah.
Okay, then it's been asked today. Does anybody want to have a stab at that, or does somebody want to come back to Bryn on that one?
Shall I just come in there, Chair, just for a
Come
moment?
on, Lynette.
Yeah, with the new categorisation of Welsh medium schools, etc., that's just come in, we officers have been looking at where about in that categorisation schools are. So I think commissioning us to bring a piece of work to scrutiny on that would be a suitable part of the work programme, and we would be happy to do that.
Thank you. Thanks, Lynette.
Does that suggest you're content with that answer, Bryn?
That makes me very content. I'll wait the piece of work. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Members, has anybody else got comment on work programme? Okay then. Those are the meeting dates.
My hand is up. Sorry.
Oh, Margaret, I'm not very good at this today. I'm struggling with.
No, it's fine.
I'm not as au fait with Zoom as I am with Teams, but yeah, I got you up now. Margaret, please.
Sorry. One thing which is not the work programme, but maybe an information time when a presentation on the structure of the education department now, because maybe I've missed a meeting, but we're hearing about new groups and different things like the secondary school improvement team, etc., etc. I just wondered if we could have something on where we're on now, because I keep hearing about things and I'm sure it's my fault and everybody else knows, but if they don't, that would be helpful. That was the one thing. And then the other one, which I'm sure is on the work programme, is the funding formula, the new funding formula and school funding. That's one that is, you know, the real concern.
I think you make two very, very valid points there, and yeah, you're right on the structure. Yeah, I think that would be a quick.
Sorry, Chair. Well, we've got the presentation ready to go to talk through the team and everything, but it was scheduled for the closed meeting last time at scrutiny. We didn't get to it, and we've got it for today, but it can be for the next meeting depending on timings. But we have the presentation ready to talk through the structure, the workforce, you know, the challenges and everything. We've got that all presented in a presentation to share with scrutiny.
Yeah, Sarah's made the, thank you, Georgie. Sarah's made the comment in the chat box, school budgets and of course the schools in deficit. Those will be returning themes to the work programme and will come on as a matter of course, whether it's quarterly or I'm not sure are they 6 monthly or 12 monthly, but those will keep continuing to come around. Councillor Allard.
A very quick one, Chair. Email came around, so 1:30 this afternoon about the relaunch of the transforming education programme. I'm wondering whether we will have a bit of an insight into that at some stage.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I believe it's been, I haven't seen the email, but I believe there's some comment being made on that in the Royal Welsh, and again, that's going to be a movable piece which we'll keep returning to our scrutiny. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and if there is the direction of which the new cabinet takes, etc., etc. Yeah.
Chair, we are planning, I think, a briefing for members later on. I think it's September time. I think we're looking at data at the moment about all things transformation. So I think that's a general briefing to all members of council, but certainly then if you want anything bespoke for, I'll add it to the programme. If you want anything bespoke for this committee, obviously we can do that as well.
Good, thank you, Wayne.
Chair, I was just wondering whether the changes will be significant and they will need to go to cabinet before agreeing to, and whether we, you know, it's important that scrutiny has a sight on that before. I just wondering, possibly the portfolio could tell us about the timelines.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm told there's a press release being given at the Royal Welsh on Monday. Councillor Pete will probably be able to give us more detail on that.
I can give you something now. The changes are not significant. It's more around formalising direction and tying up generic timelines. More than happy to come back to scrutiny or indeed full council with a fuller briefing around what wave 2 looks like. But it's mainly the main changes are in approach to the transformation rather than fundamental rewriting of the original documents.
Yep. Again, that's good news to hear. And Alan's right that when it comes forward, we will have to give it due scrutiny, won't we? So yeah. And thanks for that offer, Councillor Pete. Members, any other comment on work programme? No. If not, then
remember, there's a message in the chat. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Gosh, it's all coming full on today for me, isn't it? There we go. Have I not picked that one up in chat? Is there another one there? I'm not picking anything else up in chat.
It's the one from Sarah. Jay, you did pick that one up.
Yeah, no, I picked on that one. Yeah, but again, it's a good point. That will when do we do this with the school budgets and the schools in deficit? That comes out like a 12-monthly basis, isn't it?
It does. I can't remember if it's in for September for consideration. I'll have to look back at the work programme.
Yeah, but it will be in our work programme.
Yes.
Yes. No, good. Members, I'm going to close the meeting now, but I'm going to ask you to remain with us, please. Georgie's going to give us some more detail on some different things, which we should have had before, and just an informal chat if there's anything you want to chat about. So if we close the recording and the meeting,